Miss Rivera's hand shot across the mahogany desk and grabbed my wrist just as my pen touched the signature line. The sudden contact made me flinch, and I looked up, startled. Her dark eyes were wide with something that looked like fear. "Mr. Thompson, don't sign that," she whispered, glancing toward the glass door of her office. Through it, I could see my son Brian pacing in the lobby, checking his watch. I blinked, confused. "I don't understand." Brian said this was just to add him to my account. He's been helping me so much since Margaret passed, and I thought, this isn't what you think it is. She pulled the papers away from me, her hands trembling slightly. "Please, can you give me 5 minutes? Don't leave. Don't tell your son anything yet." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and I could smell the faint scent of coffee from the break room down the hall. I'd been coming to this First National Bank branch for 32 years. Margaret and I had gotten our first mortgage here. We'd opened accounts for Brian when he was born. Miss Rivera had been my banker for the last 8 years. Always professional, always kind. I'd never seen her like this. "Okay," I said slowly. "What's going on?" She stood up, locked her office door, and closed the blinds. My heart started pounding. Through the frosted glass, I could see Brian's silhouette turn toward the office. "Mr. Thompson Thomas, I need you to trust me right now." She sat back down, spreading the papers out. "Look at these documents. Really look at them." I pulled out my reading glasses. The letterhead said, "First National Bank Account Modification Form, standard stuff." But as Miss Rivera pointed to specific sections, highlighting them with her finger, my stomach began to turn. "See this? This isn't a joint account addition. This is a complete transfer of ownership. Every account, you have your checking, savings, the investment accounts, the money market, everything would be transferred entirely to your son's name." "But," Brian said. "And this," she continued, her voice urgent but quiet, "this is a durable power of attorney. It would give him complete legal authority over your finances, immediately, irreversibly." I felt cold. Maybe I misunderstood what he was asking me to do. Miss Rivera shook her head. "Thomas, this gets worse. Look at the signature at the bottom. This form claims to have been notarized yesterday at 2 p.m. That's impossible. I was at my cardiologist appointment yesterday at 2 p.m. I have the parking receipt." She nodded grimly. "Exactly. Someone forged your signature and had it falsely notarized. They needed you to come in today to make it official by signing in person, probably to cover their tracks if anyone questioned the timeline." My hands were shaking now. "Why would Brian know? There has to be some mistake." "I hope there is," Miss Rivera said. But her eyes told me she didn't believe that. "But Thomas, I've been a banker for 23 years. I've seen this before. Not often, but enough to recognize the signs." She paused. "I need to make a phone call. Will you wait here?" I nodded, unable to speak. Through the frosted glass, I watched Brian's shadow move closer to the door. He tried the handle. Locked. He knocked. "Just a moment," Miss Rivera called out, her voice suddenly bright and professional. Then quietly to me, "Please, 5 more minutes." She picked up her phone and stepped to the far corner of her office, speaking in hushed tones. I sat there, staring at the documents, trying to make sense of them. This couldn't be right. Brian was my son, my only child. After Margaret died 6 months ago, he'd been so attentive, calling every day, helping with the house, bringing groceries. His wife Jessica had been wonderful too, helping me sort through Margaret's things, driving me to appointments when my hip was acting up. But then I remembered something that hadn't sat right at the time. 3 weeks ago, Brian had casually asked how much Margaret's life insurance had been. I'd told him $300,000. He'd nodded, said something about making sure I was financially secure, and then asked about the house. Was it paid off? Yes. And my pension? My 401k? My savings? I'd thought he was just being concerned, being a good son. Miss Rivera hung up and returned to her desk. "Thomas, I've just spoken with our fraud prevention department and I've called someone else who needs to be here. I need you to trust me. This is going to be uncomfortable, but it's necessary." "Who did you call?" "The police." My heart nearly stopped. The police? Miss Rivera, surely we don't need... We do. Her voice was firm but kind. Those documents are forged. That's fraud. And if what I suspect is true, this is part of something much bigger. Brian knocked again. Harder this time. Dad? Everything okay in there? This is taking a while. Everything's fine, I called out, my voice cracking. Just some complications with the paperwork. Miss Rivera typed something on her computer, frowning at the screen. Thomas, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Has Brian asked you to sign anything else recently? Any other papers? I thought back. He brought over some documents last week. Said they were for updating my will. To make things simpler. His friend's a lawyer. Drew them up for free. Did you read them carefully? I trusted him. I skimmed them. He said they were standard. She closed her eyes briefly. Did you sign them? Yes. Do you have copies? He said he'd bring me copies after they were filed. Miss Rivera's jaw tightened. She made another call, this one even more hushed. When she hung up, she looked at me with something close to pity. Thomas, the detective is on her way. She's about 15 minutes out. Can you stall your son until then? I don't understand what's happening. I think your son is trying to steal everything you have. She said it plainly, without sugarcoating. And I think this isn't the first time he's done it. The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought about the last 6 months, how attentive Brian had been, but also how he'd subtly encouraged me to stop seeing my friends from the church group. How he'd suggested I was getting forgetful and maybe shouldn't drive at night anymore. How he'd started handling my mail, saying he didn't want me to be overwhelmed with bills. I need to talk to him, I said, standing up. No. Miss Rivera's voice was sharp. Thomas, please. Just 15 minutes. If I'm wrong, you can sign whatever you want and I'll apologize profusely. But if I'm right, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I sat back down. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Each second felt like an hour. Brian knocked again. Dad, come on. I've got to get back to work. Can we just finish this? They're making copies, I called out. You know how slow these old machines are. It was the longest 15 minutes of my life. I kept replaying memories. Brian as a little boy, learning to ride a bike. Brian graduating high school, college. Brian's wedding to Jessica 5 years ago. Margaret and I had given them $30,000 as a wedding gift. Brian had seemed disappointed it wasn't more. When had things changed? Or had they always been this way, and I just hadn't seen it? Finally, Miss Rivera's desk phone buzzed. They're here, she said quietly. She stood, smoothed her skirt, and unlocked the door. Brian immediately pushed in. Dad, what's taking so long? I've been waiting almost half an hour. He stopped, seeing Miss Rivera's expression. What's wrong? Behind him, a woman in a dark blazer and slacks stepped into the doorway. She had close-cropped gray hair and carried herself with calm authority. Mr. Brian Thompson? Yes? Who are you? She pulled out a badge. Detective Sharon Martinez, Financial Crimes Unit. I need to ask you a few questions about these documents. She nodded to Miss Rivera, who handed over the forged papers. Brian's face went white, then red. I don't know what this is about, but these documents contain a forged signature and a false notarization. That's multiple felonies right there. Detective Martinez's voice was professional but hard. You want to tell me why you brought your father here today to sign over his entire estate to you? It's not like that. He wanted to... I didn't, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. I thought I was adding you to my checking account. That's what you told me. Dad, you're confused. Remember, we talked about this? You're getting older, and you said you wanted me to help manage things. Did your father know these documents would transfer complete ownership to you? Detective Martinez asked. Brian's jaw worked. It's for his own good. He's been so forgetful lately. Mom just died. He's not thinking clearly. Someone needs to... That's not what I asked. A long silence. Mr. Thompson, Detective Martinez turned to me. Did you give your son permission to forge your signature on these bank documents? No. She nodded. Miss Rivera, You mentioned on the phone that you had additional concerns? Miss Rivera pulled out a file folder. 3 months ago, a client of mine, Mrs. Dorothy Walsh, came in with her son to sign similar paperwork. I processed it. I had no reason to suspect anything wrong at the time. But Mrs. Walsh's daughter called me 2 weeks later, frantic. Her mother had been put into a nursing home against her will, and the son had drained her accounts and sold her house. The daughter is still fighting it in court. What does that have to do with me? Brian demanded. Mrs. Walsh's son worked with a lawyer named Marcus Webb, the same lawyer whose name is on the will, documents Mr. Thompson mentioned. She looked at Detective Martinez. When you called to tell me you were coming, I did some research. Mr. Thompson isn't the first. There's another case, Mr. Harold Chen, whose daughter came to me 6 weeks ago with the same story. Same lawyer, same type of paperwork. Detective Martinez pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. Marcus Webb. Yeah, we've been building a case against him for elder fraud. Looks like he has a network of people who bring him clients. She looked at Brian. People like you. This is insane. Dad, tell them. Tell them you wanted me to have access to your accounts. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I saw a stranger. No, Brian, I didn't. His expression shifted. The mask of concern fell away, replaced by something cold and calculating. You're making a mistake, old man. You're not going to last much longer anyway. What are you going to do with all that money? You're alone. You have no one else. I'm your son. It should be mine. The words were like ice water. Detective Martinez stepped forward. Brian Thompson, you're under arrest for attempted fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent. Everything after that was a blur. More police arrived. Jessica was picked up at their house an hour later. She'd been in on it too. They found documents showing they'd planned to have me declared mentally incompetent next month, using a doctor Marcus Webb had on his payroll. The next few weeks were a nightmare. The investigation revealed that Brian and Jessica had been planning this since Margaret got her cancer diagnosis 2 years ago. They'd just been waiting for her to die, and for me to be vulnerable enough to manipulate. The help they'd offered after her death had all been grooming, isolating me, making me doubt myself, getting me dependent on them. Marcus Webb's network had defrauded at least 11 elderly people in the last 3 years. Brian and Jessica had been involved in 3 of those cases, including Mrs. Walsh and Mr. Chen. They'd made over $400,000 from those schemes. I testified at their trial. Brian didn't look at me once. The judge sentenced him to 12 years. Jessica got 8. Marcus Webb got 20. On the day of sentencing, I sat in the courtroom and felt empty, not victorious, not satisfied, just hollow. My only child was going to prison. And part of me knew that if Miss Rivera hadn't stopped me that day, I'd probably be in a nursing home right now, drugged and confused, while my son sold off everything Margaret and I had built together. Afterward, I found Detective Martinez outside the courthouse. How did you know? I asked her. How did you know to come so quickly when Miss Rivera called? She smiled sadly. I didn't, at first. But she told me your name, and it connected to something we'd been investigating. Sometimes luck is just being in the right place at the right time, or knowing the right people. She paused. You should thank her. She saved your life, probably literally. These schemes don't usually end with the victim just losing money. Sometimes they end much worse. I did thank her. A few days later, I went back to the bank with a bouquet of flowers and a thank you card. Miss Rivera cried when she saw me. I'm so sorry, she kept saying. I'm sorry it was your son. You have nothing to apologize for, I told her. You saved me. We talked for a long time that day. She told me about her own mother, who died the year before, how she'd seen the signs of someone trying to take advantage of her mom's grief after her father passed, how she'd promised herself she'd never let that happen to anyone else, if she could help it. You didn't know me that well, I said. You could have just processed the paperwork. Why did you take such a risk? She shrugged. Because it was wrong. And because I kept thinking, what if that was my mom sitting in that chair? What would I want someone to do? That conversation changed something in me. For months, I'd been drifting, lost without Margaret, lost in grief, let myself become a victim. But Miss Rivera had seen me as someone worth saving, someone worth fighting for. I started putting my life back together, reconnected with my church group, started volunteering at a senior center, and I began speaking about elder fraud, working with Detective Martinez's department to educate other seniors about the warning signs. One day, about 6 months after the trial, Miss Rivera called me. "Thomas, I need a favor, and you can absolutely say no." "What is it?" "My daughter, Melissa. She's trying to get into medical school. She's brilliant, but we can't afford the tuition. I've been working extra hours, but..." She sighed. "I know you've been thinking about what to do with your estate. You mentioned wanting to help people. I just thought, I'm sorry, this is inappropriate. Forget I said anything." "How much does she need?" "Thomas, I wasn't." "How much?" A long pause. "First-year tuition is $60,000. But I can't ask you to." "You didn't ask. I'm offering." I thought about Brian, how he'd felt entitled to money he hadn't earned, for help he hadn't genuinely given. I thought about Miss Rivera, who'd risked her professional reputation to save a client she barely knew. "Your daughter wants to be a doctor?" "Yes. She wants to work with elderly patients. She spent a lot of time with her grandmother before she passed. Then she should be a doctor. Tell her the tuition is covered. All 4 years. Consider it a scholarship from the Margaret Thompson Foundation for future healthcare workers." Miss Rivera was crying again. "I can't accept that. It's too much. You saved my life. You saved my dignity. You gave me my future back. This isn't too much. It's not even close to enough." I changed my will the next week. The bulk of my estate would go to a foundation supporting elder abuse prevention and awareness. Miss Rivera was named as the trustee, with a generous salary. Her daughter's medical education was fully funded. I set aside money for a few other causes. Margaret had cared about animal rescue, literacy programs, cancer research. Brian would get nothing. That part hurt. But I'd learned that being a father doesn't mean being a fool. Love doesn't mean letting yourself be destroyed. Detective Martinez told me that my testimony had helped convict Marcus Webb's entire network. 7 other people were facing charges. 11 victims, including Mrs. Walsh and Mr. Chen, were getting restitution. Mrs. Walsh's daughter thanked me personally, said her mother was finally able to leave that nursing home and return to her own house. "Your case broke everything open," Detective Martinez said. "Because Miss Rivera caught it before any money changed hands, we had the evidence we needed in its purest form. No questions about whether you really wanted to give your son that money. No claims that you were mentally incompetent when you signed. Just clear, obvious fraud." 6 months after the trial, I got a letter in the mail. Prison stationery. Brian's handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Dad," it said, "I've had a lot of time to think. My lawyer says I might get out in 8 years with good behavior. When I do, maybe we can talk. I know I messed up. I'm sorry. Love, Brian." I read it 3 times. Then I wrote back, "Brian, I've forgiven you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You stole from me. You tried to rob me of my dignity, my independence, and my future. You were willing to destroy me for money. I will never trust you again. I will never have a relationship with you again. When you get out of prison, I wish you well. But you are not welcome in my life. I hope you find a way to live with what you've done. I've found a way to live without you. Your father, Thomas." I never heard from him again. Margaret used to say that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who cares, who sees you as a person worth protecting. By that definition, Miss Rivera is more family to me than my son ever was. Her daughter Melissa is in her 2nd year of medical school now. She calls me Uncle Thomas and sends me updates about her classes. Last month, she came home for Thanksgiving and had dinner at my house. She told me about her dream to open a practice specializing in geriatric care, focusing on patients who might be vulnerable to abuse or exploitation. "I want to be like Mom," she said. I want to be someone who pays attention, who cares enough to ask questions. I looked across the table at Miss Rivera, who was helping herself to more mashed potatoes and arguing with her husband about the football game on TV, and I felt grateful. Not just for what she did that day in her office, grabbing my wrist and stopping me from signing my life away, but for showing me what real family looks like. It's the person who risks something to save you, who sees you when you're invisible, who refuses to look away when something's wrong. That's what Margaret would have wanted for me. Not to die alone in some nursing home while my son counted my money, but to be surrounded by people who actually cared. I'm 71 now. Brian will be released when I'm 77, if I live that long. I hope I do. Not to see him, but to see Melissa graduate from medical school. To see the foundation help more people recognize the signs of elder abuse. To have more Thanksgiving dinners with Miss Rivera's family, arguing about football and eating too much pie. Sometimes people ask me if I regret having Brian, if I wish I'd never been a father. I don't, because for years I was a good father. I loved my son. I raised him the best I knew how. His choices aren't my failure, they're his. What I'm grateful for is that I had a second chance. That Miss Rivera grabbed my wrist that day and said, "Don't sign that." That she cared enough about a client she barely knew to risk her career, to call the police, to fight for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Margaret would have liked her. She had a saying, "The best people are the ones who act like they care when they have every reason not to." That's Miss Rivera. That's Detective Martinez. That's Melissa, choosing a career path dedicated to protecting people like me. They're my family now, the family I chose, and who chose me back. And I'm richer for it than any bank account could ever make me.